And what's happening, everyone? Welcome on into the Check Your Brain podcast, hosted by me, Tony Mazur. That is my name. That is my podcast logo if you're watching on the video on YouTube for now. You never know what's going to happen in this crazy election year. What I'm going to say, it's going to get me dinged again. But yeah, go check me out there on my YouTube page. Also, I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. For the tiers are $3, $5, and $10. You can go check out for extra podcast, video, and whatnot. And if you don't want to pay for any of that, I don't blame you. Trust me, I listen to a lot of free podcasts that have extra content too. And I'm like, yeah, I'll pick the free one. Every Wednesday, this podcast goes out. And this particular Wednesday, I am speaking with a comedian that I've known for a number of years now. Had him in my old radio studio during my old radio days. And that is Nathan Timmel. He's a comedian. He's an author. He seems to really get under people's skin online. We'll talk about that here in a second because of a certain TikTok video that went viral a few months ago. But Nathan, good to have you.
Thank you for having me. Before we talk about me, I'm easily distracted. You said dinged again. What have you gotten in trouble for? I'm curious.
I have no idea. Here's what it was: I had a YouTube email that came out a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, and it said you had some medical misinformation on a podcast from 2022. And I'm like, I have no idea what this was. And they deleted the video. So it could have been something completely innocuous and I don't even think I said it. It was a guest of mine that said it. But I've had a lot of guests say some things that have gotten me in trouble before, which is why I'm not in radio anymore. But that's a different story. But yeah, I couldn't even go back and hear what it was that I got in trouble for.
Oh boy, I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I'm very curious as to your story because one of my best friends, he stood in my wedding. I was one of two people invited to his wedding. Like he had a no guest wedding except for me and one other person. We are really, really good friends. We met when he was a DJ and I got him fired. And I was back in Milwaukee, and I stand by my comment. And it turned out I was the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't like I said anything so outrageous. It was they were moving on from him anyway. They just used me as a convenient excuse. But I'm going to tell you the story right here. Don't worry. Lack of a trigger warning. There's nothing shocking coming. What happened was I decided to put on a comedy charity show where we have a benefit and give all the money to the charity. And we chose actually, you know what? I'll play with it. I'll try and avoid any trouble. I won't name the charity, but I'll just say it sounds like the Bake a Fish Foundation. And my friend, he gets me on. This is my first time on radio ever. I'm sort of like an open mic comic. I'm barely hosting, but I want to do this charity thing. I've never done radio, and he sort of gives me the lead in and is like, hey, tell us about the charity. And I said, well, absolutely. The Bake a Fish Foundation is a wonderful charity that takes children that, they have a disease. They're not going to make it. And it gives them the opportunity to do something they've always wanted to do before they pass away, like swim with the dolphins, visit Disney World, or have their first homosexual experience. And the next day, my phone rings, and it's the president of the Wisconsin chapter saying, how dare you suggest a child might be gay? You could never suggest, because that's where we were back in the dark age. I'm sure some people are still there today, where the fact that it wasn't the fact I suggested they would do something inappropriate. It's the fact that how dare you suggest a child be a homosexual? And he lost his job because they complained to him. I apologized, trying to save his job. I'm like, no, that he had no idea. That's all me. Don't fire him. He got fired anyway. But yeah,
it sounds like the Megyn Kelly situation, because if you remember Megyn Kelly back in 2018, she was on MSN, or she had a show on NBC,
right?
And it was terrible. This is a woman who's interviewing Vladimir Putin and everything. And then the next segment, she's doing Pilates and it didn't work out. No one was watching this. So she makes a kind of offhanded story about how when she was growing up in the 70s, it wasn't uncommon that someone would darken their skin a little bit because you were a big Diana Ross fan, or in those days, Billy Crystal was doing the Muhammad Ali impression.
Yeah.
You would darken. It wasn't full on minstrel show Al Jolson blackface, but they said Megyn Kelly defends blackface, so she is fired. No, it seemed like you fired her because she had really terrible ratings, and you
Yeah.
found a reason to fire her. But so it sounds like that's what happened with your buddy in radio.
It wasn't ratings. It was they were changing format again. They had
Mm.
this was around the time of grunge goes to alternative goes to I think they were becoming a Jack FM
Oh yes, the
where
iPod.
right. And so it
We
was just
play
convenience.
anything.
It was a chance to avoid severance is all it was is we don't have to give you anything because you violated but like you said it was just sort it was there was nothing yeah, there was nothing untoward about it. It was just a joke. Was it proper for like a Disney family radio? No. Was it okay for grunge or alternative radio? I think it was. I don't think anybody listening was offended. It was just, it got back to the wrong person who, oh, clutch my pearls. We must talk about what was said on the radio by that nasty
Breaking news:
comedian.
comedian is a comedian.
What's that?
Comedian tries to say something funny.
Right. Yep. But there you go. What, yeah, they will always find a way to avoid paying a severance package, is the long and short of it.
My story with radio, I've told it a bunch of times, but because I had you at my radio station a number of times,
Yeah.
and you were, and I, as I said in our DMs, that you were one of my favorite comics who would come in because
Oh,
you know we would have a we didn't really have a deal with the comedy club, but it was kind of one of those. I'll be honest, it was a quid pro quo thing where I would have the comics on it, and then they would give me some stage time. So
and there's
I'm
nothing wrong with that.
not gonna lie, hey, I have an opportunity. If people didn't like it, well, then get your own damn radio job. So I was able to do that. And there were 3 radio stations that were having comics on. And usually one of them was at about 7 o'clock. We were at about 8:15, and the other station across town was about 9 something. So the comics would come in about 7:50, and I would entertain them for a little bit. And it was old school type of radio where they would go, hey, we got Nathan Timmel on, he's going to be at the Funny Stop this weekend, 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. So tell us about who were your biggest influences. And you're just like, oh god, here we go again. And at least you made the segment a little bit better, because a lot of comics, they're hungover, they're still drunk, they're on edibles, god only knows what's going on. The last thing they want to do is be on a radio show, but they have to do it because it's part of the deal with being at the comedy club. At least you were one who made the segment a little bit interesting. And I always felt bad when we would have the comics would come in, drive all across the greater Akron Canton area to go to these radio stations for a 3 to 4 minute hit. Oh, that's really funny. Yes. Hey, or here's the website, here's the plugs. I'm going, they just drove 25 minutes and sat in the green room for another 20 for a 3 minute segment that no one's really going to go see them. But okay, I guess it's part of them's the breaks of being a touring comic, but I couldn't stand it. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an opportunity to showcase your personality, to do a little bit more than just a typical Bob and Tom couple of yucks and here's your plugs.
Well, over time, I grew to appreciate that more than because there are two types of radio shows or interviews. One is the, hey, I'm going to put on this false voice and just talk. And at first, you get turned off by that. But when you start bumping into the other one and you show up and they're like, all right, give me a premise. Okay, good. Hey, we got a comedian. He quit smoking. That's funny. What? Tell me you quit. And you're supposed to just like jump into a bit. Oh man, I used to smoke and now I quit smoking. So even the false enthusiasm is still enthusiasm because when you bump up against the people that just don't want you there and are not shy about it, you learn to just smooth everything over. You're like, this is the gig. You show up, you do your 2 minutes, you go home.
And they wonder why people care about podcasting and Spotify nowadays.
Right.
But why aren't people listening? We're not getting our ad dollars. Clients said that we're not getting enough return on investment. Gee, I wonder why. Because you had your comic in, the only interesting person that you could have had in your 4-hour radio show, and you had them on for 2 minutes to say where they were from, and that George Carlin was their biggest influence in the career. And then we go at the plugs, then we got to get to a traffic and weather update.
and maybe this just speaks to who I am. You if I'm lazy and my job is to be a DJ and I can have someone take the weight off my shoulders for 20, 30 minutes, like, hey, we have a comedian in the studio this morning. I'm going to sit back and get a drink of coffee. He's just going to, like, you'd think it would just be easy and fun to have someone in there that sort of, I don't want to say takes over the show, but, when you are on air, you have to find topics to talk about. There is engagement. And if it's just you doing the same thing every day, you know, having something different might be just fun and, to use the same word, different enough to keep people listening. Who knows?
That's why I enjoyed when I was filling in hosting, because when I would have the comics on, I would have a Bob Levy, a Dave Landau, whoever was coming through town, Bonnie McFarlane, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't keep them for the 4 minute segment. I would keep them a little bit longer. Hey, can you stay through the break? Yeah, okay. Well, we have a couple of other things we'll talk about. Make it worth their while, and instead, it's just regular radio is dying, but it's not because of deregulation and Clear Channel bought all these radio stations that we can't afford. It's because of content. And traditional media is only existing right now because you have baby boomers who still listen to it. They can't figure out these newfangled iPhones, and that you can actually get a lot of songs, and you can listen to full albums on here, and you don't have to go to the record store and wait every Tuesday. It's just you have to adapt, and I get it. Change is tough, but when those boomers end up going away, well, the new generation, statistically, they're not checking out regular radio. So that's why my whole thing was, you got to fish where the fish are. So when I was working in, here's I'll tell my firing story. So I was on that radio station that I had you on. It was an AM station that, whatever, it was talk station. And I had an opportunity to become a program director at an alternative rock station. And I was fighting for the possibility of having an alternative rock station where you, once again, fish where the fish are. Let's see, alternative. Let's go back to that Milwaukee station that played the grunge back in the 90s. How about this? The people who still listen to Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, some of them still do listen to radio. The people who listen to today's alternative listen on Spotify. So why would you have a station that plays today's hit music where someone who's in their 40s, 50s, and 60s couldn't care less about? And I was fighting tooth and nail, and I realized, I don't know if there's a payola thing. I don't know what's going on. This is really not going to work out too much longer. I'm just going to enjoy this while I can. I could put it on my LinkedIn, Tony Mazur, program director at such and such station. Well, I also had my podcast at the time, and I had the Patreon. And I had a friend of mine named Gino Bisconti, who's a comedian, who was performing at the Funny Stop, where you're going to be performing here coming up this week. And we'll get to we'll get to the plugs here in just a second. We got a couple of funnies here for you. And so I had his co-host at the time, Aaron Berg, on to talk about it was called Comedians of the Compound. They had a bunch of comedians. They would all do about 15, 20 minutes and get off stage. And it wasn't the greatest show in the world, but I had already had his co-host on 6 months earlier. So I said, well, why not I get Gino on this time to promote the shows? And I said, what we'll do is we'll put out a couple of podcasts and we'll do some exclusive Patreon stuff. So it's like, hey, if you want more to this, go to the Patreon. Well, Gino drops a certain word that little uncouth by today's audiences. Let's just say it. Yeah, I think we can all figure out what that was, but it was in the context of one of his jokes. He's a shocking comedian. He's like a shock jock. And because of that, I had somebody who was on my Patreon, who I believe was a jilted former employee, was sending stuff over to my bosses saying, one of your hosts has a racist podcast.
There you go.
So, and then told everybody who was still in contact with him, Tony Mazur, he's this big racist who has a podcast. When I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, but I had to fall on the sword because ultimately it was my responsibility by booking him, by not editing that out. But I'm also pretty free speech, free expression. Like, okay, yeah, he said it was behind a paywall. Didn't realize that there was somebody who was a mole sending that stuff over to my bosses. So I was shown the door. Actually, as we record this, about 2 years ago around this time. So since then, I'm just doing the podcast, but I work a blue collar job. I make significantly more money than I ever did. And it gives me flexibility to do more stand-up. So yes, it sucks. It sucks being fired for a little bit and wondering what you're going to do next. The worst part is getting fired at 9:30 in the morning and knowing your wife doesn't come home till 5. So I'm stewing for the next 7.5 hours. What do I say? How do I tell her that I don't have a job? That we do have about 7-8 weeks of severance, but I don't know where to go from here. Do I stay in radio? And if I stay in radio, do I have mud on my name that everyone's going to say Tony's this racist? Or do I just say, you know what? That ship has sailed. And what I decided was The latter was way more profitable, way better. The fact that I'm doing this podcast and talking to you from a home and not a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment tells you everything you need to know. So, hi, everything's great now.
I honestly don't know that I've ever spoken to a single person in radio that talked about how good the money was. So never, never heard any see him driving the big old Ford F-350 or a Lamborghini, anything that costs more. No, it they don't pay in radio.
Not anymore. And it's there's a term called voice tracking. For folks who don't know, voice tracking could be somebody who's living in Des Moines, Iowa, who is voice tracking a station. You're doing your traffic or introing the next Led Zeppelin song up in Detroit, also up in Cincinnati, over in Indianapolis, and you think it's like, oh, it's that guy who lives down the street. Oh yeah, he knows my town. Probably not. So they do several stations and make about $30,000 a year. So
Yeah.
long gone are the days of the Rush Limbaugh, Howard Stern money. You're making basically Dairy Queen Blizzard maker money at this point.
And it does, and blizzards are more enjoyable. At least you get to snack on the product when you're there working.
Yeah, and when you get an ice cream headache from the blizzard, it only lasts a couple of seconds and not several years. So yes, hi everybody. It's Nathan Timmel. He's on my podcast today. Let's talk about him a little bit. Hey, you're coming to town to the Funny Stuff Comedy Club here this weekend. But talk a little bit about who you are. Again, I don't want to be hacky radio guy, but you're somebody that you're a Midwestern comic. You're a long touring comic. You still live in the Midwest. Did you really make that plunge? Did you ever think like, okay, this has got to be the time? I'm going to perform at the Comedy Store. I'm going to go to the Comedy Cellar in New York. I'm going to do this. Or was there just something that you just enjoyed being a Midwestern comic and being somebody who gets, your schedule's full. You're touring all over.
Well, I did. I moved to Los Angeles for a handful of years and I screwed everything up. I made it well, first of all, the big mistake was if you are interested in comedy, you generally choose between New York or Los Angeles. Chicago has exploded and can be you could choose Chicago now, but I chose Los Angeles. And once I got there, I realized, oh, if you're a comedian, you go to New York because Los Angeles is basically I'm an actor, hand model, comedian. I'm a voiceover artist, comedian, dog walker. There's all these hyphens. I just
What
wanted to
year
be a
was this?
comedian. What's up?
What years were these?
I'm not good with years. I couldn't even tell you what year I got
Was it
married.
well? Because the reason I mention that is that there was that comedy explosion that did happen in L.A. back in with Joe Rogan, the Comedy Store
It
back in
was
the.
right before that. I was
Okay,
really good friends with Tom Segura back in the day. We would hang out, go to lunch, and I was good friends with him. So it was before Rogan discovered Segura. Um, but that's the thing is, so this is what I say when I did wrong is two things. One, I didn't want to be an actor, so I should have gone to New York. But two, the discovery thing. I generally would go do the show and hang out for a little bit and go home. I went to the improv and I passed my audition. And when you pass your audition, they give you a phone number. Call this, give us your avail. Say I'm available on Tuesday and Friday or whatever. And I got it. And I called in every week. I never worked because what you have to do is put in the FaceTime. You have to pick a club, Laugh Factory, Improv, or Comedy Store. You go to that club every single day. You put in the face-to-face time and say, with my example, the improv, where I passed their audition. If I had gone there every single day, oh yeah, Timmel's over at the bar. I like him. Oh yeah, he's cool. He was funny. Oh, we have a slot. Timmel, put Timmel up. And I just called in every Monday, like, oh, I'm around. And I become just a fart in the wind, just someone calling this number who, when there are 1,000 comics calling, or even if it's only 200, they forget who you are because they're holding an audition a month, I think it is, and they're passing two or three comics, or maybe it's I don't know. The whole point is only after leaving did I realize, oh, if I had just gone there every single night and let them get to know me, I would have gone a lot further. So while this was going on and I hadn't figured that out yet, I was just sort of grumbling, like, oh, I call in every week. Nobody puts me up. I'm doing these sort of coffee shop shows. And even back then, the way of discovery was over. where agents would go out to an open mic and watch and go, "Oh, that guy's funny. We should try and give him a premium blend, or someone should look at him." That had already passed. I don't know when that ended, but that was over. And it was all rubbing elbows and, "Oh yeah, let me talk to my manager about you," or "Let me try and get you." And so my nose really itches there. I think I got it that time. Um, what happened was I was touring through the Midwest, and I was originally from Wisconsin. I met a woman who I was performing in Iowa. She was in the audience. We got to know one another. We dated long distance for a year, and after a year, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? We're not going to date long distance forever. We're not going to be in a long distance relationship for the rest of our lives. Like, oh, I love my girlfriend. She's lived in Iowa for 10 years, and I moved. Who's going to move where? She didn't want to move to LA, so I moved back to Iowa. And I'm not going to lie, it's been a struggle. You got to work harder because you live in a flyover state. You're not taking it like Iowa. What's Iowa known for comedy? There is a stigma, but what are you going to do? It's what I chose, and that's where I am. So it sort of answers your question. I sort of took a sideways because, yeah, I had lived in LA. I did sort of go for it a little bit. I didn't make it, but I am responsible for that. I know a lot of people who point fingers and lay blame constantly, like, "Oh, nobody recognized my genius," or, "Oh, you see that guy? He got a special. He's not funny." Life happens. Nothing is fair in life. I will at
Oh yeah.
least own up to my end of it, which is what I could have done different. Could I have been accidentally discovered? Sure. Did I bank on that? Not really, but maybe. Could I have done more? Absolutely. So to answer your question, I'm a Midwest comic by choice, by reflection. I see what I did wrong in Los Angeles, and now I'm a dad, and I'm not going to move my kids to LA or New York. I'm just this is what I do now. This is
Especially
who I am.
nowadays. I mean, because like you said, it is the hang, the comedy
Yeah.
hang, and I'm not a comedy. Like I'll hang out a little bit, but I don't like doing it every night. I'm not in love with me personally. I'm not in love with comedy the way I guess I was 10 years ago when I was single. I'm married now. I'm trying to start a family. Going through all this, I have a cat who
Right there. Yeah, you
right
do.
there who wants to.
Anybody listening is missing out on the cat action.
Yep, there you go. That's Scarlet.
And
Yeah, I mean, like
I don't mind the hang. With me. It was, I also had a job. You couldn't pay the rent on being a comedian, so I had a job, and occasionally that meant a lot of the hang takes place late at night after the show. Like you go there, 8 p.m. show ends 10, 11, but you're still there till midnight 1. And when you have a job, you can do that every so often, but
mhm.
you're gonna burn out. Now, there are people who make sacrifices. I'm not complaining. There are people who will do that burnout because that's the dedication it takes. Look, Tiger Woods doesn't become Tiger Woods by slacking. Caitlin Clark doesn't become Caitlin Clark by slacking. You focus on what you want, and you need 100% of the drive and attention to get there. And I fully realize that I didn't do that. I own up to it.
Well, and then also, like you said, that at that time it was a transition period of the old school versus the new school. And I always look to the Dane Cook model as that this was the new generation, that you couldn't just wait for Jim McCauley from the Tonight Show to give you a call because he saw you at the Laugh Factory or the Improv or the Comedy Store and said, "Hey, kid with big cigar in his mouth, you're funny. How would you like to be on the show with Jay Leno this week?" Those days were gone at that point. And it turned into basically, it seemed like by the time you left LA was where it got to, you hung out so Joe Rogan can get you on his podcast. And that's how you saw Bert and Tom Segura and a lot of these guys and Ari and everybody
Yeah.
really made their bones after that. And so that 2000s area was a transition period, not just for you, but for a lot of comedians. What do you do where you're not going to end up being the guy at the comedy club that you go there and you look on the wall and say, "I have no idea who that is." And you talk to the club owner and say, "Oh yeah, that guy stopped doing comedy like 20 years ago. And yeah, we don't know. I don't even know why he still has his headshot on the wall, but that's one of those guys." And those are a lot of people who didn't keep an agent, who didn't put their stuff online, who didn't really transition to that new generation. And you were at that point, you were at that cusp of, you could do this, but then also you realize from what it seems like, you realize what was more important is being a dad, being a husband, and you got to put in the work, and you have to treat comedy as your wife, which is why there's a lot of comics who are in
Yeah.
therapy and not married and go through broken relationships.
Well, and I'll You reminded me of this. I remember distinctly now. I had forgotten this. Something you just said. I said earlier that I made a choice. I decided to move to Iowa because I fell in love. And you could call this fear-based decision making. I would, if someone accused me of it, I would not fight them on it and say, no, how dare you? You don't know anything about me. It was a dual decision. On the one hand, I met someone that made me happy, and I felt that, you know what? I think this could go the distance. It's not a, well, let's just move to Iowa and see what happens. And then you're, single a year later, because that happens too. But there was also, combined with that, a sense of, I would go to the Comedy Store and I would see these guys who had been there 20, 30 years and done nothing and were still hammering away like an open micer, waiting for that big break. And in a moment of fear, I saw my future. What if nothing happens for me and I pass up this relationship because I want to just keep grinding it out? Now, like, who knew Rogan was around the corner coming down to the Comedy Store and plucking out people he likes? That was not, you don't have a magic ball that you shake and says, stick around for Rogan. You look at what you see around you, and I saw a lot of desperation. And on the one path, I saw desperation. On the other path, I saw this woman, and I said, I think this is the best bet. And I don't regret it at all. There's
Mhm.
nothing I can do about it. I can't look back and say, oh, if I'd stuck around, because I was friends with Segura, he would have pulled me along, because he did. He had me open at a couple of his shows when he was starting, just on the cusp of becoming the first baby step, when we were both open micers. But it's like, oh, it looks like he's gonna, but also anything can happen. He could have had the rug yanked out from under him. He didn't, God bless him. But you know life is understood in the rear view mirror. All we have is what's in front of us.
Well, and he also has a wife who is in comedy as well. And there's something that is to be said, because it's weird to think about Bonnie McFarlane, Rich Voss are a comedy couple, and Christina P. and Tom Segura, a comedy couple. But for the vast majority of people, when you say that, oh, you got off stage, and they don't think that's work, they think you're just played around on with the microphone. I'm not saying your wife does. I'm not saying my wife thinks that way, but a lot of people don't understand the stresses of different jobs. My wife works in she works in TV, and I had worked in radio. So when she comes home, for example, we're recording this. Full disclosure, it's the day of the eclipse. So in about an hour and a half, or almost 2 hours from now, we'll have the eclipse passing right over me. And so she's working a long shift today. Well, I don't work in media anymore, but I still know her stress of what she's going through about what are we going to cover with this eclipse. We got to cover the fact that there's a baseball opening day today. We got to cover the traffic going in and out of Northeast Ohio. We got to do this, and this. And I think people who aren't in that business, who don't know what it's like to be in some form of entertainment, they can't relate. And it's tough to do that. It's tough to go through that. You say, like, yeah, well, you wouldn't believe what I had to go through. I had to lift this much, and I had to do this, and I was on this truck, and I had to deliver this thing, and this, and this. And you say, okay, so now we're ranking, and it doesn't really work out. So it's good to have somebody that understands what you are going through. But again, like you said, what it is that you fell in love with somebody, and you realize that I love this person more than I love the I don't want to say the goal to make it, because I think a lot of people still want to make it, but your priorities probably changed. Because that's what happened with me, is that when I first met my wife, before that, I was in a relationship that for the last year was just, I can't afford to break the lease right now. I don't have that kind of money. I work in radio. I make $27,000 a year. It's not really working out. So I have to pretend that I love this person that I'm with. It gave me great material that some of it I still can use to this day. But do you stay in a bad relationship because it's good for your stage persona? Or do a lot of comics, are they afraid of going to therapy, or are they afraid of going to enter a new relationship to possibly be happy, because it's going to affect them and what they put out on stage? I don't know. I mean, is that just the tears of a clown, that we all have to find a way to be miserable even if we are on the cusp of happiness?
I don't know if that's a comedian thing, but I believe in general people fear change. What you have is what you know and understand. So if any change other than, oh my goodness, I won the lottery, most change brings about fear. Okay, I'm in an unhappy relationship, but at least I'm in a relationship. I mean, that's better than being lonely, right? Not always, no. In fact, it's probably better to be lonely than be in an unhealthy relationship, but people don't see that. And again, until they're out of the relationship and they realize, oh wow, this is so much better. When it comes to comedians in particular, I know quite a few that fear changing their act, not just their persona, but you see people that get locked into these same 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. And this is where I know the laughs are. I've talked to so many that, okay, I got a new joke I'm going to try tonight. And you know them and you know them well, and you know that they haven't changed their act in, however many years. And they do 10 minutes of warm up and they have the audience. And then they nervously just sort of like, haha, new joke. And it bombs. And then they go right back into the old material and they don't try anything new again. Change is frightening and people react to it differently. I was lucky in that I don't know. I enjoy fluidity, and yeah, I didn't mind the idea of, well, I'm just going to pack up and move everything to Los Angeles. Oh, this isn't working out. I'm going to pack up everything and move to Iowa. But that's just, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that I feel that I would have been way further along and way better at comedy if I went up every night. The problem is, well, it depends on where you live. Like you said, you live in the Midwest where there's not as much, and I live in the Midwest too. You can go to a bar gig, but chances are a bar open mic is just going to have other comics there, and they'll only laugh at you if they know who you are. If you're just some randos in town or like, oh, I'll try to do stand up. It's going to be a lot tougher than it is to go to a New York City where you can bounce around and do 12 mics a night if you need to.
Yeah, we
It's
have
you
two.
have to really be dedicated to it. And I'll be honest, like again, I been doing comedy for over 10 years now, but I don't love it the way I did when I was 26. I'm 36 right now. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll go up when I want to go up. And does that make me a bad Even some people will say you're not even a comic if you're not going up on stage at least 5, 6 times a week. I'm like, then fine, then I'm not a comic then.
Well, we have two showcases here once a month, and they generally the past few months have fallen on the same night. One is in Iowa City, the other is in Cedar Rapids. They're about 25 minutes apart, and so yeah, you kind of pick one every so often. A coffee shop thing will open and close really quick. Someone like, we're going to try and get a showcase, an open mic going. And, it'll last for a couple of weeks, but those take effort. So when it comes to opportunities, you're New York, you're Los Angeles. They may have a lot of bad open mic gigs, but they have a lot of opportunities. And you don't get those in smaller locations.
Speaking of marriage and everything, I wanted to get to this because it kind of went pretty viral for you. Man's rant against wife backfires spectacularly when followers take the wife's side. So what the heck happened here? What was this?
First of all, that is a misleading headline. Did it backfire or did I get millions of views? Because the argument there is no such thing as bad press, I kind of believe in it. This can be a really long story. So you can interrupt me at any time. I will try and be as thorough as possible. And I'll start by saying this. I kind of missed that. The thing you're talking about, I went viral. I was the most hated man on TikTok for 3 weeks in December of 2023. And I kind of miss it. It was fun. I'm not gonna lie, it was fun. I still have messages saved where people are calling me all the worst names. My wife Googled it a couple times and went, "Ooh, I don't want any part of that." There were people that were leaving Facebook status updates, no relation, not tagging me, just their own personal accounts that would say, "All I want for Christmas is for Canned Pumpkin Guy's wife to leave him." And so did it backfire? I don't know. Um, Here we go. The day before Thanksgiving of last year, my wife sent me to the store to buy the ingredients to make pumpkin bars. And when I got to the store, canned pumpkin was not on the list. So I gave her a call to see if we needed it or not, and she didn't answer. And so I sent her a message and she didn't respond to that. And I was mildly annoyed, like, as you get in any marriage, I'm like, oh, why can't you just respond? And so that Friday, I had a show and I concocted my little shopping story into a bit, which I told to the audience, and I got a big response. I got a big laugh. On Saturday, I repeated it, and I got a good laugh. Well, Monday comes around and I realize, oh my goodness, I don't have anything to post today. And just for anybody listening, I post a video a day on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I post every single day. It's just a short little 1 minute nothing. And so I said, oh, well, that story worked on stage. Let's tell that story. And I'm not entirely stupid. I'm a dumb guy, but I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. So what I did is I wrote a description that said, hey, this is sort of a true story, kind of. Didn't really happen like this. I'm a comedian. This is a joke. And I'm not really angry. It was a big nothing, but I'm going to pretend to be angry for this video. I'm going to do a little rant because I think that might sell it. Let's find out. And then I posted it. I did like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 takes until I got one that I thought was good, posted it, and for about a week, everything was normal. It got about 200,000 hits, and I would say 99.9% of people responding went, ah, I hear you, marriage. Ah, that's funny. And then two of the dumbest influencers on the planet got a hold of it. And one is a relationship, quote, expert in her like 20s, which means she has a lot of life experience. Note the sarcasm. And the other, and I love this part, was an English professor who apparently can't read because the description says this isn't real. Well, they both treated it as real and said, you know, this guy is an example of toxic masculinity and what a husband shouldn't be. And their followers went insane. And here, let me specify. I said I was the most hated man on TikTok. They blew up my TikTok. If you look at it today, on Facebook, everybody knows me and it didn't go viral. And all my friends were like, ah, you and Lydia, that's funny. On Instagram, it was probably a 75-25 split. For the first week, it was 100% marriage. We get it. Then it's still to this day, 70% of the people get it and leave, say, oh, it's kind of funny. But 25% say, oh, how dare you? You're a horrible person. On YouTube, I would say it's 95, 96% of the people that view it say, oh, I've been there. Marriage is. But TikTok is the one place where the users are younger, dumber, have less life experience, and they're more desperate. So what happened was, after that first week of 200,000 hits and people enjoying it, the dumb influencers say, make an example of this guy. And people who can't really think for themselves just start piling on. They start like, oh, well, this is the way it's going. Let's just jump on them like we did with Justine Sacco or anybody else that's going to get canceled.
Justine Sacco, by the way, for folks who don't know, she's the woman who was I think she was going
the first one.
She was going to Africa, and she said something like, "Hey, I'm going to Africa. Hope I don't get AIDS." And then she shuts her phone off as she's on the plane going like 20 hours over to Africa, and she
hold on one second. Hold on. Let's be very clear. She tweeted that privately. It was a private tweet to like, I'm going to make this up, 100 people, her friends, and one of the friends screenshot it, and then it ended up in someone's hands who then made it go viral. So it's not like she even did this publicly. She kept it private and someone else released it, kind of exactly like what happened to you behind your paywall.
A little bit,
so
yeah.
Go ahead, continue then.
Yeah, but then and then she turns her phone back on. They even do a whole Family Guy episode of this too, where Brian does something where he's going to see. There was a Kevin Hart movie. He's like, "No, I'm educated. I went to college. I'm white, and I'm watching Baywatch." And then he turns his phone off, and everyone tries to cancel him after that. So yeah, it was a similar situation. But yeah, like you mentioned about TikTok, because I think the older generations, whether it's baby boomers, Gen X, and even millennials, we were all raised of, my wife. I mean, for God's sakes, I have a Rodney Dangerfield picture when I do these podcasts. Half his act was, my wife, she can't cook. The flies are always replacing the screen door. That kind of stuff it was embedded in our culture. It was out of the top 3 comedy concepts, it was, my wife, the real battle axe. And I don't think today's generation, because many of them are not getting married, don't understand that, no, this is tongue in cheek. Doesn't mean when Ralph Cramden said Alice to the moon, he's not literally going to punch her until she flies up to the moon. It was, yes, there has to be a little bit of a context to it. And yes, there was in the 1950s, but again, there's a little bit more nuance to these things. And I don't know if the TikTok generation knows anything about nuance.
What? And I'm not just that, but they're not married. They don't have life experience. And so let me say this quickly. I'm actually kind of proud of it because if you talk about having something go viral and quote getting canceled, did I say something racist? Did I attack the trans community? Did I take a side in Israel Palestine? Nope. I said, hey, marriage gets frustrating at times, doesn't it? And that set people off. Oh, it was great because like I said, they have no life experience, and I insult them in sort of a sympathetic way because I feel kind of sad for a couple of reasons. One, they can't think for themselves. But what I did notice, I will say this, I have to give credit. When something gets that viral, what you notice is first you have this wave of, yeah, I can't think for myself, and this influencer told me to say this, so I'm going to come attack this guy. But what starts happening and did happen is I saw this video and I came here, or I saw someone telling me to hate you, and I came here and you're a comedian, or, like, oh, I get it. Or, well, no, I've actually been married for 10 years. I understand where you're coming from. And so the house of cards that the hate gets built on starts to collapse. And what happened with this is for a couple of weeks when it was blowing up, I just sort of let it ride. I didn't address it at all. And when I finally did address it, I didn't apologize. I said, look, I'm sorry to say this, but you're all dumb. I see what you're doing. You've got this guy in Canada who is sort of, his life seems to be based on the ponytail guy from Goodwill Hunting. He's a know it all who's not very smart and has no life experience. And or maybe he has life experience, but he's a know-it-all without any actual knowledge, if that makes sense. He has the little passages he's memorized, like Ponytail Guy. And what makes it interesting and sad overall is when it comes to the influencers that put me on notice, and many of they don't have original thoughts, ideas, or content. And what they seem to do is go onto TikTok and look for things that they can then insult, make fun of, or take out of context because they don't have original thoughts of their own, they have to attack other people to lift themselves up. And what happened with the masses on TikTok is when it became this sort of wave of hate, you'd see people looking for desperate acceptance in, ooh, if I stitch a video, ooh, if I can gain clout by also hating him, ooh, if I can get some likes by saying, this is the worst husband ever. That's what people do. It just becomes this sort of wave. And I just wrote it. I thought it was fun. And what it was also funny to watch it shift when I pointed out, hey, you do realize the description says it didn't happen this way. I wasn't angry and I love my wife. They would say, well, you shouldn't talk about women like that because some people are going to take it seriously. I'm like, not the point. I said, well, you do realize it was a joke. No, you're just saying it's a joke now because it backfired. I'm like, no, let me. And I would show the video. I took a video of me performing the joke on stage to audience laughter. And then they would try and pivot and say, well, you're just trying to turn it into a joke now. And it's like, you don't get to win here. You can be unhappy. And I even said in my response video, when I finally made it, I said, you do not have to find the joke funny. What you can't do is pretend it's real. And what you're doing right now is pretending it's real. I don't mind that you're mad at me because you're not mad at me. You are angry about someone you invented in your head. And that's fine. You took 30 seconds and turned it into something that says more about you than it does me. And it doesn't say anything good about you. And I find that sad. It is what it is.
It's honestly, it's a fantastic story because it's a modern day it's a modern day culture shock if you think about it. Like you said about that TikTok was more angry than other social media apps because the social media apps are usually enjoyed by different generations, different demographics. And when you're talking, what do you think the Venn diagram here is of people who are pissed off at you for what you said, as opposed to the same people who said, well, I'm not justifying what he did, but that Osama bin Laden had some couple of good things. It's probably a complete circle.
Right, because that was the thing last year when I remember when that started to happen. I read the news, and I don't get gobsmacked very often. It takes a lot to surprise me. But when I was reading that younger people were saying, I had heard about 9/11 and Osama bin Laden, but now that I read what he says about America, well, he had a few good points. I'm like,
you got to hand it to
wow,
him. No, I don't think you got to hand it to Osama bin
wow.
Laden. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, you don't get to say, well, sure, what he did was a bit extreme, but if you listen to him, no, you don't stop there. You get to stop. There are certain things, because let's take it to an extreme. Everyone hates what I'm about to do. I even hate it. I hate it as well. But whenever you compare something to Hitler, it's like you've like, okay, that's your, but are we going to, outside of white nationalists, are we going to see, Hitler apologists from the younger generation? Like, oh, oh, actually, now that I say that, maybe we could, because they're so anti-Israel. They
They
might.
are. I am noticing that a little bit more of an uptick where they're saying that I'm not justifying it, but you're getting a lot more. Well, here I am going to get dinged again. But YouTube, if you're listening right now, all your little gadgetry, I'm talking about this in context here. There's a
Don't even
lot
say the
more.
word. Say you have people that are saying a horrible event in Germany didn't happen. See, we just
Yes.
worked an end around to avoid the algorithm hearing, because I mentioned the mustached fella's name on TikTok once, and they dinged that video. I wasn't even making a joke. I can't remember the context, but it was something like what I just said a minute ago. Like, well, if you compare this to that leader, and they just heard the leader's word, and the next thing I know, it's like, ding, you've been flagged. I'm like, we have to be able to talk about subjects. We have to be able to discuss history. We have to be able to discuss life. But these algorithms and the idea that people fear reality, they suppress, 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 and it makes things worse.
Those are people who should look into, Osama bin Laden's early life instead of getting mad at Nathan Timmel having a joking TikTok about his
Hi.
wife.
Who's right
It's
there? She just came in and I said hi to her.
it's and that here's the thing is that I followed you for a number of years and you absolutely love your wife, and that anything that you talk about is in jest. You guys have a great relationship. That I see you posted on your Facebook page about her, and you've written blogs about her, and that she's also very funny and she gets your style of humor and stuff. So I think if there's anybody who probably wasn't the least offended person, it was probably her.
Well, and it sort of irritated some people, and I knew it would. I sort of let her know, like, just so you know, when we do this, it's some people are gonna come after you a little bit, and they did, but not a lot. It was very small percentage. But we posted a follow-up video, which was what my wife, it was like my wife's reaction to me becoming canned pumpkin guy. And the video is me in a chair and her looking at my phone, and her working on a puzzle because she likes to work on puzzles. And I go, hey, that canned pumpkin video is blowing up. Everybody's saying I'm an a-hole and you should divorce me. And she goes, how about that? Hey, do you want to get Thai food or anything tonight? And she perks up and goes, oh, let's get Thai food. Like, her interest is not in what's happening online in that fake world. Her interest is, ooh, what kind of dinner are we? Because that's literally what it was. When she first heard about it, she was alarmed. She's like, wait, everybody's saying what? And then when she like I said, she Googled, she started reading the comments, and she's like, these people have no context. They have no clue they're making a decision about 14 years of marriage off a 30-second video. They don't get it. And so that calmed, like, you hear that all these people are saying things and you get nervous, and then you see what they're saying and you realize they're not that smart. It makes you're like, oh, okay, I can weather that storm, because it's a storm of stupidity.
Well, if you want to see Nathan and see him live, he's there this weekend at the Funny Stop, my home comedy club in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. There, and I see you're in Wisconsin, Stillwater, Minnesota, a couple of other places. Go to nathantimmel.com, Timmel.com, and go check him out. And also, I have your stand-up special that's here, Unapologetic. That this
Yeah.
one came out. You posted a month ago.
Leap Day. I posted on February 29th because I'm like, what are the chances of that date rolling around again? Let's not have anniversaries. It's the 1 year anniversary. Oh, nope. I guess it's not the 1 year. That's the 2 year. Nope, not celebrated. It'll be 4 years before I get to say, hey, I put that out on this day. So I don't have to keep track of it.
I was 2 days away from being born on a leap year. Back in 1988. My mom, her roommate in the hospital room, her roommate had a kid born February 29th, 1988. And my mom was like, yeah, not that it really matters or anything, but it's like I would have loved to have been able to avoid that. And I was able to. I was supposed to come out 2 weeks earlier and I didn't. I want to stick around with mommy. And yeah, so I could be 9 years old right now. So my wife would have been well, I'm not going to say the word, but a map. They call them maps now.
Your wife would have been a bad person. Let's put it that way.
That's correct. Yeah. So
And my daughter was born on our wedding anniversary. My wife went into labor in the morning, and she said, "Oh, am I going to have an anniversary baby? It'd be really neat to have, a birthday and a wedding anniversary on the same day." And they went, "Nah, not going to happen." Well, 12:15 a.m., it happened.
the gift that keeps on giving. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the Christmas birthday. It's
Yeah.
like, oh well, instead we get you a bunch, or probably get you one big present for your birthday. It's like, oh, thanks, mom.
Yeah. Well, now we just, our wedding anniversary is absolutely a backseat to it's the daughter's birthday. Oh, and there's something else going on that day. What is it again? All right. We declared our love for each other and put on rings.
That's right. You go to Chuck E. Cheese, but you get a beer at Chuck E. Cheese then.
Yeah.
Something like that. Well, Nathan, thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming on the podcast again. Go to nathantimmel.com. And where can we find you on social media? Or do you do podcasting? Because you got the pro microphone there. You got actually a better one than I got. I got to update this thing.
I
But
don't know if it's
yeah,
better. You
where can we
sound fine
find
to
you
me.
on, as we call it, these socials, including TikTok?
I'm the only Nathan Timmel out there. I have the unique name. So if you Google me, you're gonna find if you just like, oh, I like Instagram, that's my favorite, and you look at Nathan Timmel, that's where you go. Actually, let me pull it up just because I don't know. My wife is the web expert. She's really smart and does my web stuff. And I think we used to, oh, I guess we took it off. We used to have the in the corner on nathantimmel.com all the click here for Instagram and Facebook and all that. But yeah, if you just if you're in Instagram, you type Nathan Timmel, I'm there. Facebook, same thing. Same thing. TikTok, I just use my name and I'm the only one out there. So
I am not,
and if you
sadly.
aren't able to see me at the Funny Stop, like you just said, go to my YouTube. I have a 1 hour comedy special on YouTube. It's a month old called Unapologetic. And my friend helped me name it. I was going to call it something else. And he said, well, you're kind of an unapologetic bastard. You weathered that canned pumpkin thing without telling people, like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I never, ever set out to offend anyone. But if I do, if in my heart I genuinely feel like I've done something wrong, I will apologize. But if I'm telling a joke that I know is a joke, like that's offensive, like I'm not sorry because I wasn't trying to offend you. I'm not trying to be a shock comic. It's just that people are thin-skinned. So I called the special Unapologetic. And yeah, if you're not going to be able to see me this week at the Funny Stop, go watch me online.
Yeah, I mean, you were unapologetic and getting your buddy fired back in the day, and you're still doing it to this day. So there
Yeah,
you
and we
go. It just
became best friends because of it.
look at that. Just you being an unapologetic comedian gets you far. I mean, and again, don't apologize if you're not trying to go out and offend people. Uh,
You
sometimes I
have my
like to offend
t-shirt
people.
store up right now. Can you read the t-shirt on the left side of the screen? Yeah.
There it is. Yep. And I'm
Triggered,
pulling it up
insecure
right now.
people are easily triggered. Insecure people are easily triggered because that's what it boils down to. That's literally what it is if you are comfortable in your beliefs. I like the band U2. I know they are polarizing. I know people like, U2, I hate them. They suck. And you can say that to my face. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shrug because you don't have to like them. I do. That's fine. You are entitled to like or dislike whatever you like or dislike. And anyone they're like, you don't like U2. Well, I'm just gonna. Well, fine, we're not friends anymore. No, you suck. You're stupid. Your opinion sucks. Like, hey, you're just saying that you don't trust enough in yourself to like what you like and dislike what you dislike. I am just unapologetic because I'm comfortable in saying what I say and believing what I believe, and I'll allow you to do the same. That's the other part is you can believe whatever you want. I, my feelings aren't hurt if you hate me because I'm canned pumpkin guy. You're entitled to believe that.
That should be your next special. Just canned pumpkin guy. That's the
The
next
joke
one.
still does great on stage. And in fact, it does better because I've obviously jokes grow and develop over time. You say something, you say something, you say something. Oh, wait, what if I said this? And you say it better and you say it better. Oh, what if I add this tag? And now, it does. I did it Saturday night and I talk about it after I do the joke. I ask, has anybody heard that before? And there's usually one that says, yeah, I think so. I'm like, oh my God, you were canned, but I remember that. And they freak out
They
and
do
they get
the
happy.
doom scrolling. They're like, oh, canned pumpkin, okay, and then they go looking through something. So something got lodged in the right in
Yeah.
the equilibrium there.
Hmm.
Well, Nathan, hey, thanks for doing the podcast. Again, good luck with everything. Good luck with the special and the tour. And I'm looking, if I get off work, I think I'll be heading on down to the Funny Stop this week to go see you. But again,
I hope
Nathan,
you do.
thanks for doing
Do a
this.
guest
And
set.
what's
Do
that?
do a guest set. Come on
Yeah,
down and
there
do
you
a
go.
guest set.
I'm doing what I normally, what I used to do. I interview you, and quid pro quo, I get a guest set out of it.
Yes.
There you go.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, folks, for listening to the Check Your Brain podcast. This goes out every Wednesday if you stumbled upon this podcast on my YouTube for now. Otherwise, I'm just going to be Rumble guy. Everything will be on Rumble then. And then every Wednesday, this podcast goes out for free. If you want more content, go to patreon.com/Tony Mazur, TonyMazur. That is my podcast, the Check Your Brain podcast. And I am Tony Mazur. I'll be back with you next week with another free episode of this fine, once again, non-award winning podcast. Bye now.